Okay, good afternoon. My name is Richard Spann. I'm going to be doing a presentation and a team building exercise teaching you about the sensitivity analysis and for the purposes of capital budgeting. So to start with, first we're going to go over what is a sensitivity analysis. So a sensitivity analysis shows how changes in independent variables can affect dependent variables under certain conditions. And the way that it does this is uses historical data for a company, and it once the designated variables have been determined, then the changes in one variable will be measured in order to see what the effect is on the dependent variable. So, like I said, a good example of this would be like profit versus selling price. So, if a company wanted to look at how much profit they would make from selling a certain product, they could alter, in this case, the independent variable would be the selling price. We could alter the selling price higher or lower and see what the effect would be using a number of assumptions as well as calculations to see what the ultimate profit would be. That's kind of a simplified version. Obviously, there's a lot more factors you could include in it, but that's kind of a rudimentary example. So if we alter the selling price, what's the profit that we would get out of that? We so going with that, you have to formulate the model properly in order to actually get useful information used to make a decision. You could use a sensitivity analysis for predicting share prices, determining the effect of changing interest rates on what the bond prices would be, identifying the effect of those changes, and ultimately to make a decision. There are assumptions involved in the calculations, so it's not going to be a perfect tool. It's not going to be 100% foolproof because those assumptions could be wrong from the start, but it will give you at least some kind of insight in order to make a decision. How do you use sensitivity analysis? So just continuing forward, you gain clarity on what factors will influence the selling price and ultimately the profit of a given product. It gives insight to decision makers and managers on and trying to reduce any unforeseen circumstances or the decline of sales, identify any potential errors, and to communicate results to those that will be making those decisions. As far as the pros and cons, so it can identify potential target variables that the company can seek to go after. It can identify areas that can be prioritized, and it does give some insights but reduces uncertainty. Some of the cons, like I said before, it does utilize assumptions. So it's gonna somewhat degrade the accuracy of the product because assumptions obviously are just things going off of expert data. Um, but it will at least give some insight. It can get pretty complicated. There's actually software to analyze and make these sensitivity analysis, but um, you could also use Excel for them. And then accuracy, again, is implied within the assumptions. So the more assumptions you use, the greater risk you are taking or that it could possibly degrade the accuracy. So how do you execute them? So first, you want to identify the main factor of variables that are going to drive the model. So in my example I kind of sent earlier, we're kind of looking at selling prices versus profit. So those would be the main variables we're looking at. Next, you want to look at your focus. Are you just doing a local focus or are you looking at a global effect? Obviously, that's going to dictate the scale of the analysis that you're performing. Then you must look at any fixed variables that exist, um, such as customer traffic or something like that. Then you have to make sure that there actually is a correlation between the variables. So selling price and profit is a good one, but if you pick two variables that aren't really correlated, then you're not going to have an effective analysis. And then you want to make sure that your assumptions are stable. So you do have to make some assumptions, but overall you want to try to limit it to hard data as much as possible and to make sure you have a stability. And then on the right, you can see some of the systems you can use. You can use Microsoft Excel, there's actual analysis software, and then there's analyses that also utilize the net present value to try to estimate what future conditions will be, depending on, if conditions worsen or improve. So key takeaways, it's a great decision-making tool that can help benefit managers. There are some inherent risks, but ultimately it is meant to provide insight and help make guided decisions so that managers or whoever the deciding personnel is or are, they will have some kind of information. Here are some of the references that I used. And that concludes my presentation.